Dr. Ramnaran, Ambassador Sue, Manipal, all distinguished participants and dear students. I think maybe the normal now this gathering. I belong to the field of technology, science and technology. What I'm going to do is essentially share a perspective from outside of it. Not a diplomat's perspective, but let's say perspective of somebody who is a user of national records. Before I do that, I thought it's important to recognize that India itself is changing very fast. On the plus side, we all know India is one of the fast growing economies. I think in dollar purchase parity terms, they are already perhaps the third largest economy in the world. So we can have an ambition to really go to the top of the table, particularly because we have this demography. In fact, I'm one of those who believe that the Indian economy has grown first because of its youth force. So you have so many people, you educate them, you empower them, they do some productive output, the economy grows. There is of course a much larger unrealized potential. So both growing Indian economy and major youth force are, I think, two major strong points or areas of opportunity. Third major transition that I think we need to recognize is that India constitutes perhaps the largest market. And as early as times when I was a student, I heard a lecture from one of our industrialists, a lecture which he gave in Germany in those days. He said, India may be a poor country, but you define a buying power and find out how many people with larger or higher buying power than that threshold exist in India, vis-a-vis in Germany or for that matter any other country in Europe. He told them that you will find that the Indian market is bigger, and this is at that time. Today things are superior. So India is a big market. Whether it's an opportunity or a threat, really depends on how we conduct ourselves. And so this, on either side, we need to discuss the impact of Indian markets. On the negative side, if I may, of the transition that we are going through, weaknesses or threats, I think disparities are growing faster. They are today probably larger. And this, in many ways, it creates divides of different kind. I'm not just talking about economic divide, the question of digital divide taking place rapidly. There are other socio-cultural aspects. But that's a scenario that I think we need to carefully watch in terms of whether we are moving forward for the better or worse. And then there are, of course, connected with this, we have significant internal security issues, we all see in the newspaper every day. But I think it's a, in my view, manifestation of this larger transition which is taking place. Another point that we need to recognize, and that's very important for a group like this, particularly young students in the area of geopolitics, international relations, and so on, is the aspect that in reality, whenever we talk about policies debated, policies formally articulated, but when it comes to brass tack decisions, there are many people who may not agree with me, but I somehow developed a feeling that when it comes to actual brass tack decisions, most of these decisions are vendor. We want to move in a particular direction and go around the people who can tell us how to move about it. And then we look for all presentations coming from vendors. Depending on who is presenting to whom. That I have actually seen this in many decision-making circles, a presentation made as if it is being made by a government department, whereas it's only the name sheet, the presentation is that of the vendor, and decisions get taken. Now, I think this is a serious problem, and in terms of the policy discourse, whatever we discuss, there must be capability to translate that into decisions which are kind of independent of the people who may have interest in moving forward in a particular direction. I'm saying this because there are many things which have gone wrong in the country in the past. For example, look at fertilizers, look at coal, the way we have managed the coal scenario. You can ask a question why Indian fertilizer is not based on coal when coal is the prime energy source. You can ask a question when Indian coal is set to coal and ash, why we have not developed our own clean coal technologies and so on and so forth. And then you realize what I'm trying to say. There is another element to this, and that again, this was told to me by one of the leading industrialists in the country. And what he said was that we know that foreign exchange outgo in our country is the big ticket item is import of petroleum, import of electronics, diamonds and things like that. But he says nobody talks about royalty outgo. And the royalty outgo today, even the water that we drink, everything made here, entire valuation done in the country, but these are foreign brands. Our toothpaste, our soaps, our water. And cumulative royalty outgo from India is in fact one of the largest items of foreign exchange or balance of payment. Now, I think in a country aspiring to be an economic superpower, aspiring to be a big technology powerhouse, actually it went out of way. So, I'm just listing, the scenario as it seems to me evolving. Then we have, of course, this issue of climate change. Climate change, would mean several things to several regions in our country. The coastal region, particularly the low-lying coastal region, there is a fear of inundation, rise in seawater. There is a fear of rise in salinity, and so significant part of coastal agriculture would have to be tolerant to increasing salt levels. Then of course there are these changing climate patterns. I also believe, for example, the farmers' suicides which are taking place. In fact, Maharashtra is one of the largest. Andhra is not so much. And but it's a combination of the enhanced risk that we have got in our agriculture, partly out of the climate change, partly out of adoption of the new technology where the investments go up. And so of course if everything goes well, you earn a lot of profit. If things go wrong, you suddenly get into a huge debt trap. And unfortunately it has not been studied in a comprehensive way, but a little bit that I know and I have talked to people, it's clear to me that the risks in farming, particularly for those farmers who hold medium land holdings, that's the largest number, has gone up. Another element where I think new vulnerabilities are setting in are in terms of, for example, cyber security, and so on and so forth. So I think we should be conscious about, in terms of our dealing with external world, which is what foreign policy orientation is all about. We should be conscious about the strengths that are building up and also the weaknesses that are building up within our own country. So that's the first part that I thought to mention. Now, in that context, what should be the foreign policy orientation for us? And again, as I said, I'm far away from Ministry of External Affairs or diplomacy or any serious study of foreign policy, but I have, from whatever I have seen, I had an occasion at different points of time to interact with several groups who can make an impact on the country from outside. And of course, some little experience in dealing with atomic energy matters. It has always looked to me that for a long time our foreign policy, again with Ambassador Sood and Shrikant Sharma sitting here, but I think our our engagement has been more reactive. It's only now, the last few years, there seems to be that India is coming to its own, and we are now adopting some proactive policies. But there have been a long time when we have been actually trying to position ourselves with respect to how the things are likely to emerge. How do you react to an emerging situation? Which in a way was a sign of weakness. A country which is strong, which at least has inner awakening that we are a big country, powerful country, must behave in a more proactive way. So I think that is something we should be able to see through what's happening, what's likely to happen tomorrow, what's likely to happen day after, what are our interests, what are our weaknesses, and define our foreign policy. Second is, given that we have our democratic division, as I said earlier, I think India has a huge soft power, and we have been seeing its benefit all along. But I think there could be more structured way of both exercising our soft power and benefiting from that soft power. And in that sense, one could probably create opportunities for Indians wanting to explore themselves and explore in foreign territory. I think in terms of the spread of footprint, Indian footprint in the world scene, something much more proactive could be done in a manner that we further our interests much better. We know what kind of benefit or strength can be derived by the presence of Indians, particularly Indians of the time who have very impact on Silicon Valley, for example. I think Indian soft power is already large, can be even larger, and many things can happen in terms of serving Indian interests. Now, this could be in several areas. For example, I would essentially talk about three areas: the technology and innovation. That's what Arvind rightly said. A country becomes big or strong and powerful on the basis of its technological capability. And I think while we should see how we should build that capability within the country, but we can leverage a lot of such capability simply by presence of Indians outside. And I think it should be entirely possible to map, for example, new innovations which are in the offing, new technologies which are emerging. Just to give an example, even multinationals, for example, it's very clear that they have realized that now they should change their product profile consistent with the needs of the new emerging market. The new emerging market is characterized by lots of poor people. They have lots of needs, but they can't afford very expensive, very capital-intensive goods. Take the case of health sector. The other day, I read a newspaper in Delhi. I think some trials are going on of a small box developed, I think, by MIT. And this box is supposed to, just like a glucometer, you put a drop of blood and it will tell you the sugar status. This box will tell you the full details of your kidney function and liver function. And it costs only a few dollars. It can be, you don't require a doctor trained in pathology to do this. It can be done by any semi-skilled paramedic. We can imagine a product of this kind, very appropriate for a country like India, where medical services are not reached the interior. And so compared to putting a multi-crore facility in a city, they may want to sell maybe several lakhs or millions of products in different prices. And that's a bigger business. And believe me, the product profile of multinationals is changing that way. Not just for India, but India, Africa, and other parts of the world. So there are these big things happening in the technology innovation scene. Why can't we sort of catch up? Of course, this is a great opportunity. This is something our people can do. It's a question of giving expression to the innovative ideas. And there, I think, linking, if you track what's happening elsewhere in technology, innovation domain, create collaborative arrangements I think we can create that movement within the country, and that's what I mean by exercising soft power in this context. Same thing is true with respect to resources, energy resources or even other resources. Of course, United States is a very rich country, highly endowed with all natural resources. Very difficult for us to access those resources without paying very hefty price. But there are other parts of the world where there are resources, and we should in fact create assets. China has done so. I'm watching it for the last 15 years. I have been wanting to get some uranium mines done, but not successful. So that's another, if you have Indians sitting in these countries, if you have Indians who are big businessmen in these countries, they own their assets. If you have Indians who have a lot of influence in such countries, then I think leveraging those resources becomes much easier rather than going through this normal governmental way of buying a mine, which is so difficult. So I think here is another example how soft power can be leveraged. Same thing is true in terms of the general aspects of soft power which is being talked about, and I will not talk too much. So I think, to my mind, a very significant part of our foreign policy orientation should be in terms of these newer dimensions of kind of leveraging India's soft power simply because you have such large demographic demand, and you must create opportunities for Indians, both in India and of course outside. The second part, of course, is more well known. Everybody understands this, and that's in terms of securing the supply lines. Because even if you have assets, unless you have secure supply lines, and that is quite often debated in great details. I will not talk about it. The third thing that again I should make is when we talk about accessing resources in other countries. And even if you have secured your supply lines, it's important. For example, take the case of oil and gas. India may have inadequate resources in its own soil, but Indian refining capacity is quite large, quite significant. In fact, that's one of the strengths, and it can be leveraged. Now, how do you secure our energy resources? I just get reminded of the situation in former Soviet Union. When there was a breakdown of Soviet Union, and there are these different countries becoming independent, suddenly they had a huge crisis. All of them had their own wells, they had their own refining capacity, but the way it was arranged was if there is some supply resource in one country, its refining has to be in another country, and the resource of another country has to be refined in this country. And with that, Russia was very controlling the oil resources entirely on its own, although they were all part of Soviet Union. But and this actually gave them a big shock, all these countries, for quite some time. And after several years, they could recover. All I'm trying to say is, I'm not saying that we should do the same thing what happened in the Soviet Union in those days. But in the context of energy security of our country, I think the refining capability that we have in India can also be leveraged in a manner that the crude and gas resources remain secure in terms of continued access to these Now, there are of course a few other points, but I'll leave it there. Now, in that background, let me talk a little bit about nuclear research. I talk nothing about nuclear research and hours. So, I think the opening up of the civil nuclear cooperation has many important dimensions, but in energy context, it did open the opportunity for nuclear energy to play a larger role in India's energy security. Now, let's assume that whatever the hurdles that were there in between will get resolved now. The important point to me is that India as a country producing nuclear electricity must very quickly become a big country. Not only a big country by itself, but also a major exporter. India, according to me, people in the world should see India becoming a major exporter of nuclear reactors, provider of fuel cycle facilities. And this interdependence is very important, because otherwise, if this kind of one-way traffic going on in a very small scale, where there are no commercial stakes of anybody, I think this nuclear politics can go sour anytime. I think people need to be concerned about this. We need to become a big player. I talked about acids, so uranium acids. Our manufacturing capacity should be such so large that we cater to our domestic requirements, but also export market. Similarly, well, it's all about creating, I don't want to go into detail, but it's all about creating the interdependencies in a manner that India, people abroad cannot ignore India, but if they do, or for that matter, if they have some negative designs about India in matters of nuclear, we should hit them more than it is with India. And that is an important thing, in terms of foreign policy in nuclear matters. Another aspect that I wish to highlight, I talked about technology and innovation. The latest technology invariably lies in some of the fundamental research programs that are taking place. For example, take the case of India's involvement in CERN, Large Hadron Collider. Now, the high temperature, sorry, not high temperature, superconductivity, cryogenics. These are technologies which are being practiced on a very large scale, and our participation in CERN allowed our Indian industries to do this kind of build these technology products and supply, and it has actually brought in a lot. In fact, in those days, today we are talking about cloud and other things, but in those days, the grid technology, a significant part emerged from CERN. And India, by virtue of its participation in CERN program, was in fact one of the developers of grid technology. And we really got same thing is true about ITER, same thing is true about accelerator collaboration with Fermilab, and so on and so forth. So the short point I'm making is, if you want to really leapfrog in terms of technology of future, I think engaging in basic science collaborations and engaging in a manner that not that we just go as researchers, do experiment and come back. It's important in itself, but engaging in a manner that we participate in building those equipment. Industry kind of assimilates the technology because it's doing that construction, and then leverage that capability to expand to other areas. And that's, I think, another. So whenever we organize collaborations, it should be organized in a manner that national capabilities pulls up several. To conclude, it looks to me that number one, I think for us to be able to make an impact globally, we must ourselves we must grow faster, we must become stronger, not just in economic terms, but also in technological terms, in terms of the way we do things. The domestic program, domestic policies, and the foreign policies, they have to be in sync with each other. We can't do these things independently. Whatever I said, there is no way you can treat this as a foreign policy item and do nothing on the domestic front. So they have to be in sync with each other. And most importantly, because I'm not talking about geopolitics because that's not my area, but one has to be alive to the evolving geopolitics, and that means in terms of our engagement, where there are larger stakes involved, either in terms of money, or in terms of technology, or in terms of large programs which we engage ourselves in. I think there is this aspect of risk management. Anything can come to a halt at any point of time. We should be able to carry that forward. For example, the problems we faced in Arapur post the Americans walking out after the 74, which is a classic example. So, whenever we do this engagement, whenever we are trying to build the country towards higher level of strength, we should have always in place a kind of a plan B. Should something not work, what should we do? And so, all businesses have their risk management strategy. I think in diplomacy also we should have a risk management strategy in place so that both one can foresee some emerging scene and warn the people who are implementing the programs in the country. That scenario is likely to build in a particular. And also, should something wrong happen, it should be possible to implement a plan B so that you don't come to a landing point. We should make sure that there are no vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities are kept to a minimum. So that's another angle where I think those working together of Indian diplomacy, Indian technology, Indian business has so well, this is my perspective, and I don't know whether it fits in your normal definition of diplomacy, but